So thank you very much for the opportunity to present our paper. This is a joint work with Stuart Gabriel from UCLA and Jude Dongan from FIDIFED, who is also here. As David mentioned, this paper is about extreme fires, distant air pollution, and household financial health, and the usual disclaimer applies. So wildfires are becoming more and more common in recent years, but they're not just becoming more common, they're also becoming more destructive. Here in the figure, you can see the increase in the number of destroyed structures from wildfires, and the US government is spending $1 billion per year to fight those fires. And although the growing severity and the number of destroyed structures from wildfires, there are only few papers that have explored the effect of extreme fires, mainly due to some data challenges. Now, this is only one part of the paper. The second part of the paper is more about the smoke and pollution coming from the fires, and the effect of the smoke from fires are typically ignored in estimating the overall effect of the wildfires. And on average, around all counties in the US will experience some kind of a heavy smoke for 20 days per year. California counties on average are experiencing around 64 days of heavy smoke, as you can see in the picture. This is after the Canadian fires. And there is a large literature to show that the smoke increases air pollution. And we already know that air pollution affects human health, labor market, education achievements, and earning later in life. And what is interesting and what we are going to show in this paper that smoke and pollution are moving all across the US due to wind and rain, which is exogenous to household financial and housing outcomes. And it is salient to a population that is farther from the direct places of the fires. We are going to focus on up to 30 miles farther from the fires. Now, what I'm going to show here is the changes in smoke all over the US. This figure is from Stanford Ecolab, that basically what they're showing is that smoke moves around all over the US. Here is the PM 2.5, the pollution coming from the fire, so smoke and pollution. Moving across the US. It's mainly during the summertime, but not just in the summertime. You can see that there is smoke and pollution even in other seasons. And what moves the smoke and pollution is mainly, as I mentioned, wind and rain. And it can move very far from the main source of the fire, as we saw in the case of the Canadian fire. Now, what we are doing in this paper is, first, we are exploring the effect or the direct effect of extreme fires. And we find that there is a significant increase in out-migration due to the extreme fires. So people are moving out of those affected areas, and we see a large decline in house prices, an increase in household credit distress. The effect is much bigger among renters compared to homeowners with lower credit score. And we are also exploring the indirect effect of the fires due to the smoke and pollution. We find that households that experience increase in pollution but were not directly affected by the fire increase the spending and increase loan delinquency. And what we are trying to argue is that households that are affected by the fire have some insurance that kind of mitigate some of the effect of the fire, but households that were exposed to higher level of pollution, again, were not receive any mortgage claims, and we're going to see a larger effect on spending and on their debt. This paper is associated with 4 different streams in the literature. The first one is the effect of climate change on migration. We started with the first result that I'm going to show is that extreme fires are causing increase in out migration. there is no effect on in-migration, and overall we find an effect on net migration, which is in line with McConnell et al. We basically find very similar results to what they showed. The second part of the paper is about impact of climate change on housing and financial outcomes. There are many other papers that show that climate change affects house prices and increase delinquency. The effect is temporary, mainly among lower credit score households. And others have shown that people are using insurance claim payout to repay their mortgage and not to rebuild. We are also showing some evidence that people are using the insurance claim payout to spend more. And this is the effect of fires on spending. We also related to wildfires' effect on housing and credit markets. Here we have a lower number of papers, mainly because of data challenges. Other papers have found some mixed results about delinquency and foreclosure and lower home ownership. The effect is smaller compared to other climate events. We're gonna also focus on default, but we're gonna add some other outcomes such as spending, debt payment, etc. I think the most interesting part of the paper is more about the air pollution effect. And there is, we just talked about it, David and me, about the larger literature about air pollution. There are so many papers about the negative effect of air pollution on mortality, health. There are new papers about labor market, human capital. To the best of our knowledge, we were the first to explore the effect of air pollution on different financial outcomes using the exogenous shock of wildfires. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So we are using different data sets. Because this paper is about wildfires, we collected information on the location of each wildfire in the US. It's a new data set. We show all the locations of all the fires in the US and the number of destroyed structures. Basically, it's a merge of two different data sets, the name of the fire and the number of destroyed structures, and the location of each fire. So basically, we have information on each wildfire in the US, the number of destroyed structure, and the footprint of the fire. Now, because we were interested in smoke and pollution, we also collected information on smoke from NOAA. NOAA, it's a publicly available data. It's a shape file of smoke all over the US. And we calculated the number of smoke days for each area, sometimes census tracts, sometimes zip codes in the US. There is also some information on intensity of the smoke. And it's a daily data. Now, for pollution, we use different data sets. The main data set that I'm going to show today and discuss today is pollution levels that were captured by different monitors in the US. There are monitors all over the US that collected information about PM2.5, which this is the polluted component that is caused by wildfires. In some of our identification, we are also using the Stanford Echo Lab data. What they are doing, and I'm going to elaborate more about it later on, but they have their own models that are measuring the pollution component that is directly coming from the fires, because there is some that will argue that PM2.5, even in the area of the fire, was caused by other sources, not specifically the fires. They have a way to distinguish between those and the PM2.5 directly coming from the fires. Because we're interested in credit and housing outcomes, we also use different data sets. The first one is CoreLogic, which is a data set about housing market. And then we use also the CCP, which is a 5% sample of US households. We can trace the panel data. We can track households over time. And for instance, explore if people are moving in and out from affected areas. We also use the CCP to explore credit outcomes. So we can see for each type of credit, mortgages, credit card, etc. We can see the balance. We can see, for instance, default rate. We also used CRISM, which is again another data set, only for those that have that are homeowners that have mortgage balance. So we can use those two data sets, CCP and CRISM, to explore the effect of renters versus homeowners. And the Y14 data, which is a data set that the Fed is using to produce their stress test, we use this data set in order to distinguish between spending and debt payment. In other data sets, CCP and CRISM, we only see balances, but in the Y14, we can distinguish between spending and debt repayment. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll dive into the wildfires story. So here is a list of all the different fires that happened in the US between 2016 and 2020 that destroyed more than 1,000 structures. Now, there are other papers that have already shown that only extreme fires have an effect on credit outcomes. So this paper is only about the extreme fires. And when we listed all the fires, we wanted to have, let's say, 2 years pre-COVID. So we wanted to explore fires that happened let's say, around 2018. And the other few papers that I mentioned that are exploring the effect of wildfires are focusing on the campfire. Most of the analysis that I'm going to show today is about the campfire. In the paper, because I don't have a lot of time, in the paper there are some robustness tests for the other fires, but most of the analysis will be about the campfire. Let me just describe the other fires that we are focusing on. Again, those that happened pre-2018. Actually, all of them are in California. There is the Carr Fire and the Thomas Fire. In the next slide, I'm going to show a map which shows the location of each fire. What is also interesting is that there are LNU fire. There are 2 fires that happen in the same location. So that's the only fire that we explored after 2018 because we were interested in exploring a fire that happened twice in the same location. Okay, so here is the location of each fire. This is the Camp Fire. This is the Thomas Fire. This is the LNU fire that again happened twice in the same location. And this is the Carr Fire. And what I wanted to show here is basically that the fire, each fire happened in a specific place. Let's, for example, focus on the Thomas Fire. You can see that the Thomas Fire happened like in the north part of LA. It did not affect like the LA area, but what I'm going to show is that the smoke and pollution basically covered like the entire city. And this is why I think that it's relevant to explore not just the direct effect of the fire, which usually happen in places where there are low number of people, less populated, to explore the effect of pollution and smoke, which affected many more households. What we also want to show in the paper is, let me actually zoom in to each fire so it can be even clearer. What we are doing in this paper, as I mentioned, the data set is the footprint on the fires. It's about the footprint of the fire, which is the red area here. Most of the analysis, we're going to compare the red area, which is the footprint of the fire, to the orange area, which is 1 to 5 miles farther from the fire. We're going to cover the 0 to 1 miles, which is the brown area. In some of the analysis, we're going to compare the red area, the footprint of the fire, to the yellow, which is up to 10 miles from the fire. We have also some robustness tests for 20 miles from the fire, but most of the analysis, or actually almost all the results that I'm going to show today, is the red versus the orange. But we have robustness tests in the paper that explore like areas that are farther from the fire. The issue is that as you go farther away from the fire, the effect is smaller. And another thing that I want to highlight, sorry, is that as you can see, the red area the borders in the red area and all over the map are census blocks. And there are lots of variation in census blocks within the red area. And most of the analysis will be across census blocks within the red area compared to the orange area. Okay, for the effect of the fires, it's a simple difference in difference. What we're doing is that we're exploring the red versus the orange before and after the fire. We have some quarter fixed effect and census tract fixed effect. This is mainly for migration and house prices effect. When we're moving to credit outcomes, we're going to use consumer level data by using the CCP and CRISM, as I mentioned before, with individual and time. Time is, the CCP is quarterly level data, and the CRISM is monthly.
And it's on, Diane has his hand up.
Yes.
Sorry?
So
Oh, yeah.
you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Just for the graph you have shown, just for curiosity, why the last one, the L and U, have different scatters? Does that mean it has multiple different start point, or it is because of different reasons, like very hot weather? Just want to know whether there is some interesting differences between the last one with the previous three.
Just because I aggregated together the 2017 fire and the 2020 fire. So basically, if you look at the 2017 fire, it's only this area, and 2020, it's this area.
Oh, see. So there are different events happening at different times.
Different events happening in different times, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But today, I'm only going to focus on the campfire, which is the most destructive fire, okay? So like the campfire destroyed much more structures than any other fires, and other papers that focus on the campfire, we're also going to focus on the campfire.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's start with the results about in and out migration. Net migration is defined by people moving out minus people moving in. And we have different analysis by the, as we move farther away from the fire, 5 miles, 10 miles, and 20 miles. This is the footprint of the fire, the red area versus the orange area. So it's 1 to 5 miles, 1 to 10, 1 to 20. As you can see, there is no effect on people moving in, but there is a large effect of people moving out from the fire area. And also in terms of net migration, we also find a significant effect of people net migrating those areas that experience extreme fires. Now, in terms of the magnitude of the effect, the outmigration for extreme wildfires, overall, the effect is 9 per 1,000 resident. What we find for the campfire, which is the table that I'm showing here, is 19 per 1,000 resident, which makes sense because it was the most extreme fire, destroyed or affected more households, destroyed more houses. Most of the effect is coming from outmigration. And this is in line with the results, as I mentioned before, by McConnell et al., that people are moving out of affected areas. Here, what I'm showing is the effect over time. We can see that most of the effect is in the first few quarters or months after the fire. There is effect of outmigration and net migration. There is no effect on in-migration. And this is in line with other papers about other climate events that are showing some migration or net migration from affected areas. Overall, what I can say is that the effect, in terms of the magnitude, it's challenging to compare the fire's effect compared to hurricane, floods, etc. But if we do some kind of back of the envelope calculation, the effect of migration from fires is a bit smaller than the effect from other climate events. Now, in terms of house prices, so there are different ways to measure the effect of house prices. Here we are using the CoreLogic HPI. We're also measuring the number of transactions. We have some kind of repeated sales median price, so not just in terms of the index, but in terms of the overall effect on prices. And we're also using some data on the vacancy rate per residential properties. This is only the effect for the red versus orange areas, so footprint of the fire compared to areas that are 1 to 5 miles farther away from the fire. And we find a significant decline of around 17.5 in HPI. In terms of dollar value, it's around 34,000. We're also showing in the paper that the effect decreases over time. And again, similar to other outcomes, the effect for the campfire is much larger compared to other fires. Now, in terms of financial outcomes, so we showed some effect on migration, on house prices. So if we're comparing, again, the red versus orange, we are using here the CCP data to explore different credit outcomes. So, credit types. So we have mortgage delinquency, credit card delinquency, personal loan delinquency, and retail card delinquency. Retail card is basically the credit card that we are using for grocery stores, etc. We find a significant increase in mortgage delinquency. Same thing for credit card delinquency. As I'm going to show you, most of the effect, or the effect is stronger for credit cards. But the effect is also significant for personal loan, and we find a positive effect for retail card delinquency, but not significantly. This is 8 quarters after the fire because we wanted to limit the effect pre-COVID. So the fire happened, campfire, in November 2018, and we have eight pre-event quarters and 8 post-event quarters after the fire.
It's on
So
Dr. has his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about the personal loans. So how should I think about the personal loans? Would it be loans that were originated before the event that now people are delinquent on? Or could it also be loans people take out to help with the financial aftermath of the event and then they don't repay?
Okay, so I'm going to show some results about the number of accounts and also balance. The way that I think about it is the second interpretation that you mentioned.
Okay.
People are taking. Okay. But I'm also going to show some results about number of loans and balances in the next few slides.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so here is the effect over time, total delinquency. So this is the total different types of credit delinquency to balance. You can see that the effect on mortgage delinquency is not high compared to credit card delinquency. I'm going to explain why we think this is the case. Also for personal loans. What is interesting, or what is important to realize about wildfires is that people in 2018, now it's different, but in 2018, when the campfire happened, basically all people with homeowner insurance received some insurance claims or insurance payout, and they used the insurance payout, as I'm going to show, to repay their debt or to spend. So this is why we think that there is a lower default on mortgages, but higher on credit card. I'm going to talk about it actually now. We also verified information using CRISM, different data sets, or everything that I just showed is using the CCP. We are also using the CRISM. It's a different data set for only those like homeowners, those with a positive mortgage balance. And we find basically similar results. I'm not going to show it today. And we're also exploring the heterogeneity effect, and we find that most of the effect is coming from borrowers with a credit score below 620 in ages around 50 to 70. Now, here we are using the Y14 data, which helps us to defer the balance between spending and payment. And what we find is that households that were affected by the campfire increased their spending, but also increased their debt payment. And overall, we see a negative effect on balance and increase in past due. And what we conclude from this analysis is that although the homeowners received some insurance payout, it wasn't enough to cover their overall needs. We can see the effect over time. We can see that, again, as previous figures, there is an increase in spending over time after the fire event, but that it declines. Same thing for debt payment. As I answered before, we see a large decline in the number of mortgage accounts, and also in terms of balance, we see no effect on mortgage balance, or which is in line with the insurance story, and decline in credit card balance. This is from the CCP, which is quarterly data. The CRISM is monthly. We find very similar results using the CRISM data, which is monthly. Okay, now moving to the insurance part. So as I mentioned, homeowners in 2018, they were all at insurance against wildfire risk. When the campfire happened, they received some insurance claims payout. And they used this money to, some of them, to repay their debt, which is in line with other disaster literature that are showing that people are using insurance payout to repay and not to rebuild. But this is why in this paper we're exploring the differential effect between homeowners and renters. Renters are those that do not receive the insurance payout, and they might be or they are they have some event of health and causing them to spend more on health, on some work disruption, and specifically the campfire caused some property damage and work disruptions, which was highlighted in other papers. In order to cope with this wildfire effect, consumers spend more using their credit cards. So in the next step, what we're doing is that we are differentiating between homeowners and renters using the CCP. The way that we define renters are, or homeowners are those with a positive mortgage balance, and those that are stayed in the same location for more than 3 or 5 years. And we find that most of the effect for credit balance is coming from a decline in balance for homeowners with higher credit score, 720. But most of the delinquency results is coming from renters with lower credit score, which is in line, again, with the story that some homeowners, especially wealthier one, will not experience any increase in default because of the insurance payouts. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to move to the second part of the paper, which is mostly about the pollution and smoke that coming from the fire. So the first part of the paper was the direct effect of the fires, and the second part of the paper is more about the smoke and pollution coming from the fires. Now,
Right, I have a question.
Sorry, yes.
Can you go back?
Yeah.
So this is for the places that is in the fire, right?
Right.
Why homeowner with low credit is not having a higher delinquency?
So I think one possible explanation is that the area of the campfire, as you can see also from the number of observations, most of the people living there are very wealthy households. So the campfire happened in a location where most of the population is super wealthy. So I guess that's one possible explanation. Now, I think if we can, another possible explanation is homeowners compared to renters receive some payment from the insurance, which helped them to deal with the damage from the fire. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
China Yi has a hand up.
Oh, hi. I have a question. So did you find out any various effect according to the LTV? For example, maybe they have a small amount of loan. They don't, you say like the wealthier household, they don't really, it's just a small damage for them. I mean, did you check with the LTV for the house owners? So does it matter?
We didn't check specifically the LTV, but I wrote this comment. We are using consumer fixed effect, so I think that's one way to differ between different households. But I don't have a specific answer about the LTV.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Judong, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point about LTV. That's something we should check. Back to Diane's question, the story here is that, well, regardless of your credit score, right, for homeowners, they have homeowners insurance, which most likely has some insurance payout. So they could use the insurance payout to repay whatever extra spending they incurred. So that's why you don't see delinquency results for both groups. And the interesting contrast here is really between homeowners and renters, we think. Renters, as Nissan mentioned, they usually don't get a large insurance payout. So for them, if they have to use their own resources to cope with the fire, they're more likely to get into delinquency. So that's what you see at the lower right corner.
Yeah, so I just want to follow. Yeah, so it looks like it has to be the loss is coming from. So I just wonder, the renter, how their life is affected. Is just because of, for example, their appliances burned, or they have to have some distractions on their work or something. I just want to understand why renter is affected but homeowner is not.
Well, again, I think in terms of the fire effect, the direct fire effect, right? We think those groups were affected. It's just in terms of repaying their debt, homeowners, they got a big insurance payout. So they could use that money to repay their credit card debt. That's why you see big effect on repayment for homeowners, right? For renters, they could have been affected similarly from many ways, right? So there could be work disruption. There could be, effects on their life, and
Health
there
spending.
could be health effects, yeah, health spending and all that. So that's why Nissan showed you earlier that we see increase in spending all over the place. But at the same time, we see this puzzling effect of people making actually more repayments. And for quite a while, we couldn't figure out why we see a increase in repayment exceeding even the growth in spending. But at the same time, we see some increase in delinquency, right? So we couldn't really reconcile these two results here until we separate the consumers into homeowners and renters. And seems like the repayment effect is mainly coming from homeowners, again, due to insurance payout. And the delinquency result is mainly coming from renters. I think that's the interesting heterogeneity.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. So it looks like both of them have some like short-term liquidity needs. and then just homeowner insurance is going to provide some short-term fund, and that is the difference, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to move to the second part of the paper, which is more about smoke and pollution. Here we are focusing on areas that are farther from the fire. So this is just for illustration, okay? But what we're showing here is that the circle is around 30 miles from the fire. Because there is a smoke even before the fire, because it's California and there are fires all over, what we're doing here is we're trying to control for the changes in smoke and pollution, and we are calculating the changes in smoke and pollution, taking the long-term average exposure to smoke and pollution. This is a zip code level analysis. The dots are the monitors. Now, you don't see the same dots in every picture because it's just an illustration. It's a daily, the smoke is daily. We aggregate it to monthly, but there are not like a report from every monitor every time. But what you can see is that the fire is happening, and after the fire is happening, we see a huge increase in smoke, which directly affects air pollution. And what we're trying to do is to control for changes in smoke and changes in pollution over time to calculate the effect of pollution on credit outcomes. This is basically the same picture for another fire. We are using the same method for all the different fires. In different areas, there are different number of pollution monitors. What we did is that, again, just an illustration, but what we did is that for each zip code, we calculated the the average or the weighted average of the 2-3 closest monitors. So for each zip code, we have the number of smoke days and pollution in a radius of 5 to 30 miles from the fire. The first step is to show the effect of smoke on pollution. Now, this part of the paper, there are other papers that show the relationship between smoke and pollution. What we're doing in the paper, it's not like the main result of the paper, but we're taking 2 zip codes that are in the same distance from the fire. One experienced smoke and the other one did not, because of exogenous shock, as exogenous factors such as wind and rain, as I showed in the third slide of my presentation. And what we're showing that a similar zip code was exposed to smoke and one did not. We see a spike in PM2.5 in pollution in zip codes that were experienced heavy smoke. Just to understand the magnitude, pre-campfire, which happened in November here, the levels of PM2.5 was around 10, 12. The US government is defined normal levels of pollution to be below 12. But then after the fire, areas, zip codes that were experienced smoke, the pollution increased to around 60, which is basically the same levels of pollution in Beijing on the same day. Okay, so we're talking about a huge change in pollution in areas that experience smoke. We are doing the same thing using the same estimation with the numbers. Again, this is not the main part of the paper, just to show the relationship between smoke and pollution. The next step is to talk about the potential effects of pollution. Now, there is a large literature that shows that pollution has negative effect on health and mortality. So that's the main effect of pollution. Now, there are new papers that are also showing that smoke from fires affect the labor market. So people are in those heavy smoke days, as some of you experienced after Canadian wildfires, it's heavy smoke, you need to stay inside. It is causing some disruption and affect work, income. There are more traffic accidents, reduced tourism and outdoor recreation. So there was, after the Canadian wildfires, many schools were closed, so parents need to stay inside. And it definitely affects income, as others have shown. For instance, there is a new paper that showed that the areas that experience wildfire smoke, it reduced the quarterly mean earning by around 1,000, and each day of wildfire smoke, the same paper showed that each day of wildfire smoke reduces the quarterly equality employment by about 80 per million people aged 16 and older. Now, I don't have a lot of time, but we are also trying to show some basic analysis of the potential effect of air pollution on credit outcomes. What we are showing here is Google Trends information on the number of search for some kind of spending on air purifiers, air filter, or smoke inhalation after the campfire. Now, other papers have shown that with using better data that we have access to, the increase in emergency visits due to the toxic component in smoke after the campfire, and also increase in emergency visits due to smoke inhalation after the campfire. The effect is still there for other fires as well, but most of the effect is much larger for the campfire. We have access to other data about, it's a county level data about emergency visits for kids and number of asthma visits, and we are showing some increase in the number of emergency visits and asthma cases. So just to give you an illustration about the potential effect of air pollution, and this is why we're going to argue that air pollution should have some effect on spending, health spending, and income shock, which might affect credit outcomes. So the way that we...
Sorry.
Oh, hey. So my recollection or my understanding is that Bronson Argyle, Benjamin Iverson, Taylor Nadal, and Christopher Palmer have a paper on unsecured debt and the role of unsecured debt in bankruptcy, which captures a lot of medical debt. And Equifax data does not capture medical debt well. So it's kind of shadow debt in those kinds of data sets. So what I was kind of wondering is if some of your disparate effects on renters versus homeowners that don't necessarily match up with credit card spending might be due to shadow debt that's just not captured in these types of data sets. And if you could get, say, like bankruptcy court data to fill in that gap in shadow debt to help explain some of these disparate results, and in particular, why smoke-related shock would affect household financial outcomes through a health channel.
That's a great suggestion. I will definitely dig into it. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of our identification about pollution effect, what we are doing is that we are exploring different indifference framework using areas that were exposed to higher level of pollution to areas that experience lower level of pollution after the fire. And we're doing different robustness tests, but the main identification that I'm going to show today is above the 75 percentile exposure to pollution. And we are controlling for time and consumer fixed effect. And again, we are exploring only areas that are outside the fire event, which is 5 to 30 miles from the fire. We also try up to 50 miles from the fire, but the results are robust too. And I'm going to show the 5 to 30 miles from the fire. Now, there are a number of concerns about measuring of pollution. So I think that in terms of identification of the fire, it's more clear that there is like affected area and unaffected area. It's more challenging when we're talking about pollution because of different factors. First, as I showed before, there is smoke even before the fire from other fires. And also there is a claim that the pollution that we are measuring is not directly coming from the fire because of other sources of polluted components. So we're going to deal with those concerns using two ways. The first thing, as I talked before, we are measuring the changes in pollution or the changes in smoke coming from the fire using the delta, the difference between the fire months and the baseline levels. We try to calculate the baseline levels as taking the long-term smoke and pollution levels within each zip code. The second thing that we are doing is using an IV estimation. As I showed you in the third slide, Ecolab as a new data set, Stanford Ecolab, that they're using AI models to calculate the changes in pollution, changes in PM 2.5 that is coming directly from the fire, or they are able to connect pollution specifically to the fire in a radius of some kind of a few miles. And we use this Stanford Ecolab estimation and ran the second stage of the IRV using the daily estimation from Stanford Ecolab. So here are the results. The first one is the first estimation. The second one is the IV. What we are showing here is the effect of pollution on, again, the same type of credit outcomes. So mortgage delinquency, credit card delinquency, personal loan delinquency, and retail card delinquency. We define delinquency as 30, 60, and above days. And what we are showing is that there is effect on mortgage delinquency. Using the IV is not significant. Most of the effect is about credit card delinquency, and there is some effect on personal loan, and here we do find a significant effect on retail card delinquency, which is a credit card that are using to grocery stores, etc. We are again using the Y14 data to separate between spending and payment. We have balanced results, but the Y14 helps us to differ between spending and payment. And what we find is very interesting. We find increase in spending, which is in line with the figures that I showed before, that people are spending more on air purifier and other types of adaptation to increase in pollution. We find here what is different from the results that I showed before about the direct effect of the fire. Here we find a decline in debt repayment, and this is also interesting because of the story that the people that were affected by wildfires received some insurance payout, but here people that are living far away from the fires, you experienced during the Canadian fires, are not receiving any insurance payout, but were affected by pollution. And we find a decline in debt repayment, and overall we find increase in balance and increase in delinquency or past due for those that were affected by increase in pollution. And overall, what we are saying is that households exposed to increase in air pollution, they need to spend more, but also have some health spending or health effect, and they reduce their income because they need to stay inside. So this is why we are finding those results. Here is the effect over time. You can see that most of the effect is coming in the first few months, which is in line with the fact that there is, as you experience in the Canadian fires, there is immediate shock, but then the effect declines over time. What we're doing here is that we are differing between households with high credit score to households with credit score below 720 in terms of spending and payment. We are not able to use, or we are able to use the Y14 to differ between spending and payment, but we are not able to use the Y14 to differ between homeowners and renters. So the table that I showed before, for renters and homeowners, what we're showing here is just for overall those with high credit score to those that have low credit score, above and below 720. We see that most of the increase in spending coming from those with credit score above 720. But most of the effect of that payment is coming from those with credit score below 720. This is in line with the story about people are spending more, those with higher sources on adaptations, such as think about air purifier, which is more or less the same cost in terms of the increase in spending. And overall, the health effect or the health spending might affect those with lower credit score. Any questions?
Yeah, so I had a question. It's kind of interesting that, so it's not necessarily the same people are spending more and then also not repaying at the same, so the lower credit score individuals are not really spending much more, but they're just not repaying as much. So I
Right.
wonder, like this, you briefly brought up potential effect on employment. Is there any way for you to check that further? So it's just like why would smoke lead someone to maybe not spend more, but then delay the repayment of their debt? If it is like potentially if it's an income channel, I think it would be interesting to see that.
So there are other papers like AREUEA paper that shows the direct effect of smoke on the labor market in terms of income, in terms of employment. But they're using like very detailed information. And we don't have access to this information. So our explanation here is that, as you mentioned, people with a lower credit score might be those that are less able to work from home, or they have some more income shock. So this is the way that we explain it. Believe me that we are trying to search for many data sets, detailed data sets about health spending or labor market. This is something that we are currently working on, but we don't have access to those types of data so far.
Sure, thank you.
Maybe Judong would like to add something.
Yeah, I think that's just one possible interpretation, right? In terms of different level of income disruption. But our current interpretation is more like the following. So higher credit score borrowers are usually higher income, higher people with higher liquidity. So they usually can afford to take preventive measures to cope with wildfire smoke, right? That's why you see them spending more. For the lower score borrowers, are usually lower income people with less liquidity, right? And possibly less savings. So if for those people, if they have to spend extra money to cope with the smoke effect, they probably had to delay their repayment on their credit cards.
You're right. I guess it doesn't seem like they're spending more though. That's
Yeah,
what
well,
that's what's a little puzzling.
Right. But think about if they have a fixed amount of income coming in every month, right? Now they have to use some of that income to cope with wildfire smoke, either due to health-related issues or some other things, right? Reduction in business income, or to cope with any interruptions to their life, then they will have less remaining, right, to repay their credit card debt.
Yeah,
So that gets
sure.
to the liquidity issue or savings issue.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a follow-up questions regarding this. So is there any way that you can check this people where they work, like mostly maybe their job was also destroyed by this wildlife? So for this low credit score, maybe they also has the shock that in the labor market they cannot work anymore. But for this high credit score, people they normally work somewhere, so their work will not be disrupted that much as the low credit score. And also, can you see the categories of spending? For example, what they are doing? You say like the air purifier, but are they spending a similar products, or is it other spending? It will be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. This is something that we invested a lot of time thinking about, trying to search for data sets on labor market and spending by categories. We are using some data from Opportunity Insight on spending by categories, but it's state level data. If we have like data on spending on L, this is not something that we can easily identify using their data. So this is for spending by categories. If you are aware on spending by categories data, and you can share it with us, we will be happy to. Same thing for labor market effect. We are trying to search for like detailed data, as I mentioned, about labor market, but there are some challenges in that direction. What we are using, what we're showing, like what I showed before, is the connection between spending on not spending on health, but the number of emergency visits or some health concerns after the shock of the fire. But I agree that data regarding spending on health will be very valuable for us.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you.
I'm very glad it was a robust discussion. We're just about out of time, so it's okay to go a few minutes over.
Okay, so I have one more slide and then the conclusion slide, and that's it. So what we are doing here is very high level back of the envelope calculation. We wanted to like better understand, almost all of us experienced the Canadian wildfire this year. So wanted to understand like the effect that we find for the campfire, how we can translate it into the effect of the Canadian wildfire. We're trying to compare those two. What we're showing is that basically after the campfire, the heavy smoke that affected pollution lasted longer compared to the Canadian wildfire. But in terms of the Canadian wildfire, the exposure to PM2.5 to pollution level was much higher compared to the campfire. So I showed you before that after the campfire, the increase was around to 60 PM2.5. After the Canadian wildfire, the level of PM2.5 increased to more than 100, like 120. So even if we discount the campfire estimated smoke effect by around 2/3, still the affected American will experience effect of around 9 to 16 billion in terms of credit card spending and around 12 to 20 billion in the annual credit card debt as a direct result of the Canadian fires. Again, because it affected so many households in the US, just to understand the numbers, increasing 10 billion in consumer credit card debt is around 1% of the 1 trillion in credit card debt outstanding. So we're talking about a huge effect for the Canadian wildfire, but we argue in the paper that more research can and should be done on this topic. So just to conclude, because I'm out of time, what we're doing in this paper is that we're examining the housing and credit effect to wildfires and wildfires-related smoke and pollution. For wildfires, we find a strong effect on net migration, house prices, an increase in consumer financial distress, and the fire insurance payout is not enough to cover the expenses related to the fire event. We also find a significant effect of smoke and pollution coming from the fire on credit card spending, balance, and delinquency. And as I talked, fire insurance is typically included in the homeowner's policy, but this paper shed light on the damage from indirect effect of the fires through smoke and pollution. What we also argue in the paper is that the wildfires are happening in specific locations, usually not affecting all of households, but then smoke and pollution can affect much larger population, and other papers should take this into account in order to identify the overall effect of extreme wildfires. Thank you, and sorry for being a few minutes out of time. Thank you.
Have you all looked at non-linearities and the effect of pollution on financial outcomes? I can see it being concave or convex or neither. I'd be super interested to find out.
So the basic analysis is taking like areas that experience the higher levels of pollution above the 75 percentile, above the 90 percentile. But what you have in mind is that people that experience lower level of pollution should have like a lower effect.
Potentially a smaller effect from the same, baseline increase, or potentially a larger effect. I can see it going either way.
Yeah, this is something that we can check. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention a number I saw, which is in the United States, 1/3 of households have someone in the household that has respiratory issues like asthma. So Yisang mentioned a few times air purifiers, but the medical spending related to issues like asthma could be playing an important role here.
My mom has pretty severe asthma, and they bought 4 very high quality air purifiers during the Canadian wildfires.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is turns out it's pretty costly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good anecdotal evidence for this. Thank you, Dave.
Any other questions?
Seems like people ask their questions during the seminar, which is why, yeah, it was a robust discussion. Yeah, one more chance and anyone? Okay. Thank you very much, Nitan and Shudang. It was a great paper, really, really interesting. I hope you both and everyone here can join again in 2 weeks for our next seminar. Take care.
Take care very much.
Thank
very
you.
much, Dave.
Thank you all for listening.
Bye.